we need, Sid?
Everyone stay right up on the planks. Give your hand here. Just keep coming up, fellas. Stay with the casket. Keep coming up. Keep coming up, guys. And down together right there. Ready? You're good.
Be careful stepping back.
Yeah.
Do you prefer to leave the casket elevator? Or do you
Mhm.
okay,
I'll tell you
You want to lower it a little bit?
ladies, there's some seats here if you'd like to.
when. Do Kriya?
You want to lower it a little bit?
Not yet. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. Blessed are you, eternal God,
Source of truth and finitude.
source of truth and finitude.
Adonai Natan,
Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach.
God gives and God
God gives and God takes
takes.
away.
Tell us to remember that the fabric of our life has been torn, and to try to find those things that are eternal, that support us below, and that hold us.
Move to the front of the line, a voice says. And suddenly there is nobody left standing between you and the world to take the first blows on their shoulders. This is the place in books where part 1 ends and part 2 begins, and there is no part 3. The slate is wiped, not clean, but like a canvas painted over in white, so that a whole new landscape must be started. Bits of the old still showing underneath. Those colors sadness lends to a certain hour of evening. Now the line of light at the horizon is the hinge between earth and heaven. only visible a few moments as the sun drops its rusted padlock into place. The death of a loved one is the most profound of all sorrows. The grief that comes with such a loss is intense and multifaceted, affecting our emotions, our bodies, and our lives. Grief is preoccupying and depleting. Emotionally, grief is a mixture of raw feelings, such as sorrow, anguish, anger, regret, longing, fear, and deprivation. Grief may be experienced physically as exhaustion, emptiness, tension, sleeplessness, or loss of appetite. Grief invades our daily lives in many sudden gaps and changes, like the absence of daily phone chats, or the sudden loss of affection and companionship, as well as in many new apprehensions, adjustments, and uncertainties. The loss of a loved one throws every aspect of our lives out of balance. The closer we were to the person who died, the more havoc the loss creates. Love does not die quickly. Hence, to grieve is also to celebrate the depth of the union. Tears are then the jewels of remembrance, sad but glistening with the beauty of the past. So grief in its bitterness marks the end, but also it is praise to the one who is gone. Death has taken my beloved father, Mel Sapsewitz. I grieve in a darkened world, lost in sorrow. Loving friends bring comfort. Loving strangers, too. For my dad's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought joy and happiness and are now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. L'chol ish yesh shem, shenatan lo Elohim, v'natnu lo aviv v'imo. Each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. L'chol ish yesh shem, shenatnu lo komato, v'ofen chiyucho, v'natan lo ha'arig. Each of us has a name given by our stature and our smile, and given by what we wear. L'chol ish yesh shem, shenatnu lo heharim v'natnu lo ktalav. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. L'chol ish yesh shem, shenatnu lo hamazalot v'natnu lo shchenav. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. L'chol ish yesh shem, shenatnu lo chata'av v'natna lo kmihato. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. L'chol ish yesh shem shenatnu lo sonav v'natna lo ahavato. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. L'chol ish yesh shem shenatnu lo hagav v'natna lo malachto. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. L'chol ish yesh shem shenatnu lo tekufot hashana v'natnan lo ivrono. Each of us has a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. L'chol ish yesh shem shenatan lo hayam v'natan lo moto. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death. To everyone there is a name, and to everything, to every time, there is a season. L'chol zman v'et, l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. This then is the time to speak about a life. My father, Melvin Lee Sapsowitz, he never used the Lee, he rarely used the L, was born in New York, a Queens boy. His father, my grandpa Max, an immigrant from Hungary, was a glazier, and my grandparents ran a glass store on 8th Avenue in Manhattan. Dad was largely raised by his grandmother, my great-grandma Pauline, whom he adored. As a kid, he got into a number of fistfights defending his little brother, Sidney. Dad attended Brooklyn College, where he majored in chemistry, and where he met my mother, Barbara Rubin. Hi, Mom. In a Shakespeare class. The story they told was that when the professor, unable to decipher my father's scrawled signature on the class roster, called on him, he kept mangling the pronunciation of Sapsowitz, and my father refused to answer when called on unless his name was pronounced correctly. And eventually the professor gave up and moved his eyes up to the name immediately above Sapsowitz in his alphabetical class list in clear, legible penmanship, Rubin. My mother ended up getting asked all the questions intended for my father, and she initially couldn't stand him for that reason. Later, her father, my Papi Louis, warned her about marrying that crazy Hungarian. My dad was part of a crowd of good friends as a young man. Many of those friendships lasted into the early years of their marriages. I remember Hank and Elaine, Bob and Wendy, Arnie and Judy, Mickey and Lolly. My parents were also close throughout the 38 years of their marriage, with my father's brother Sid and his wife Phyllis, as well as my mother's dear cousins, Eddie and Bev. Also important were our Canada cousins, Eva and Miklos, and the memorable summer Kathy and Gabby spent with us. My father's first job out of college was working for Manischewitz as a food chemist. He later accepted a position with Topps Chewing Gum, where he stayed for most of his professional career, eventually becoming Vice President of Research and Development. He used to tell people that I was weaned on bubblegum, and he may have been right. For a stretch of years, he probably knew more about bubblegum formulation than anyone else on the planet. It was a quirky niche, but it was his. He had to make several foreign business trips. One, I remember, to Mexico, one last minute to the former Yugoslavia to solve chewing gum emergencies. And yes, there is such a thing as a chewing gum emergency. As a young man, Dad played handball, and he was reportedly a very good bowler. He even had his own bowling ball. He was also an excellent ping pong player, something he had the patience to teach me all those years we had a ping pong table in our basement in Clark Summit. Also in that basement was the piano. He always had the same requests when I played for him. Jean, Jean, roses are red. And Moon River, wider than a mile. He loved magic tricks, and he even took a few classes to learn them. And he could always beat me, hands down, every single time on any calculation using a slide rule while I raced to punch in the buttons on my calculator. I wish I had that slide rule. He loved photography, started taking slides in 1954. I have about 3,100 of them. He also took movies on special occasions, like my birthday parties. I remember that big, cumbersome movie camera with the 4 blinding bright lights. In 1965, Topps moved its manufacturing to Northeast Pennsylvania, and we moved with them from New York. First to Applewood Manor in Dallas for a year, then to Kingston for 6 months, and then finally to Clark Summit. My parents built a new life here, in many ways very different from the life they had left behind. We spent many weekends and holidays traveling back and forth between Pennsylvania and New York, where both my grandmothers and my great-grandmother all remained. Anyone remember the tokens for the Delaware Water Gap? Dad had good friends from work. Bill and Muriel Mason, who were like local grandparents to me, Henry Elkind and his wife Fern. He enjoyed tennis and for a while golf. He was part of a men's poker game for many years. In later years, he and my mom learned to play bridge and enjoyed that very much. And there was the Daleville crowd, the Piskins, the Coopermans, the Goldmans, the Cornfields, the Troys, and others. He took a couple of young men under his wing, Phil Troy and Jeffrey Cooperman. Dad retired from Topps young in his 40s, and he did some consulting work in the confectionery industry. He was very proud of the 2 patents he acquired for tableting chewing gum. My parents enjoyed theater and music and entertaining an extended family and friends and traveling together. When I asked my dad what was his favorite place he'd visited, he said, Tivoli Gardens. I have memories of some wonderful family vacations. Capon State Park in West Virginia stands out, along with the trip to Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. After Mom died, he let me convince him to take a few short father-daughter trips together, and we had some good adventures. Most memorable was the canoe trip in the Everglades when our guide almost got eaten by an alligator. When Mom got sick, my dad was an amazing advocate and caretaker. He summoned emotional resources I didn't know he had in her last months. Lost without the love of his life, he quickly got involved with Ellie and was loyal to her for the rest of his life. He moved to Albany to be with her, and they were snowbirds for a few years, as my parents had been. When the back and forth became too grueling, they moved to Florida full-time. Dad was a romantic. He was a spiffy dresser. He liked looking nice. He loved a clean shave. He loved shoes. He would be appalled at the footwear I am wearing today. Sorry, Dad, I wasn't anticipating a funeral when I packed for this trip. He loved a bargain. He loved reading the Wall Street Journal and following the stock market. He invested well. He followed the news avidly. He loved Fareed Zakaria. He hated Donald Trump and his minions. He loved watching basketball, often cursing at the television screen, using language he never used in any other setting. We recorded him once and played it back for him. He was shocked. He loved ice cream, and he loved chocolate, good chocolate. And he especially loved good chocolate ice cream. He hated chewing gum. He always said, if you see me chewing gum, I'm working. He loved solving problems, figuring things out, repairing something in a creative, unconventional way. He was curious. He loved researching and learning new things. He loved all 3 of the houses he owned: the starter house in Canarsie, the house on Woodside Drive in Clark Summit, and his last house in Florida. He loved me, though I know I mystified him. Dad had a sharp temper, and he was a consummate grudge holder. Regrettably, that trait deprived him of some lifelong relationships. After a series of health crises 6 years ago, he and Ellie both ended up at Barrington Terrace in apartments next door to one another. Reluctantly acknowledging that he really did need the help that an assisted living facility provided, my father was disdainful of many activities, particularly bingo. Bobby Grossman, then executive director, got him an iPad and taught him to use it. For a few years, while Ellie happily played bingo, My father explored the world on his iPad. At the invitation of a staff member, he partnered with her in researching and co-presenting a series of programs on music. He successfully agitated for and became an avid participant in discussions on current events. In short, he became a macher at Barrington Terrace. My dad had diverse tastes in music. He liked classical music and shared with me a love for some of my favorite folk singers. He adored Nat King Cole. Both my parents loved Broadway musicals, a love they passed on to me. Once, some years ago, when I was on the East Coast for a family bar mitzvah, I convinced him to take the train down from Albany and meet me in New York. We managed to get last-minute tickets to see Wicked, and we had a wonderful day together. My father had a particular love for Les Mis, and to my surprise, for La Cage aux Folles. I say to my surprise because while I would have expected the show's themes of gender bending to make him uncomfortable, still, he loved it. He especially loved Song on the Sand, la 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 la. And I am what I am. And Dad, you will appreciate this more than all the traditional prayers. I am what I am. I am my own special creation. So come take a look, give me the hook or the ovation. It's my world that I want to take a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I am. I am what I am. I don't want praise. I don't want pity. And this was his favorite line. I bang my own drum. Some think it's noise. I think it's pretty. So what if I love each sparkle and each bangle? Why not learn to see things from a different angle? Your life is a sham till you can shout out, I am what I am. I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses. I deal my own deck, sometimes the ace, sometimes the deuces. It's one life and there's no return and no deposit. One life, so it's time to open up your closet. Life's not worth a damn till you can shout out, I am what I am. The last few years have been hard. Dad had always loved driving. He'd often say, let's go for a drive, with no particular destination in mind. And he hated having to give it up. He grieved leaving his house. Friendships, neglected, fell away. As his dementia progressed, he stopped using his iPad, though he always intended to go back to it. Keeping track of time became difficult. A painful loss to a proud man who had always kept his watch set to the correct second and been so punctual. There were important relationships in his last years. I am so grateful to Mark, his friendly visitor who made a deep impression in a very short time. Also Deborah, the program director at Barrington Terrace. Michael, his physical therapist, Cynthia, the nurse, Anise, and others who helped him with personal hygiene. And most of all, the loving attention of Allison, his care manager, who kept me sane during the long months of COVID-imposed separation. And to you friends who kept calling him, even when he didn't return your calls, and who then kept calling me to ask how he was. As he declined physically and cognitively, Dad often expressed surprise, as if he somehow expected he would be immune from the indignities of aging. Sadly, he was not. He asked me frequently how old he was, and each time seemed astonished by the answer. With COVID, things became harder still. My visits stopped abruptly. I hadn't seen him for 16 months. Bobby's sudden departure last November, with no explanation or opportunity to say goodbye, was a painful blow. When Ellie broke her hip and needed to move out of her apartment into the skilled nursing wing, he faithfully visited her, but lived with the anxious knowledge that she was not expected to live much longer. So many losses in a really, really hard last 3 weeks. I'm so sorry. And so very grateful that you created a living will. I read it out loud to myself before I signed the hospice papers. That made it easier, a little. Thank you for that. My friend Judy Berkowitz pointed out that, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you died on the eve of a Jewish holiday. I liked that. Daddy, you were a good and generous man, a good husband, a loving father, a good provider, a loyal companion. Your struggles in this world are over. Your neshama has left its worn-out body and flown back to its source. You can rest in peace now, under the trees, here next to Mommy. I love you. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Rui Lo Echsar, Minut Deshe Yarbitzeni, Al Memenuchot Yinahaleni. Nafshi Yishavev, Nafshi Yishavev, Yancheni b'maglet tzedek. צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך מגץ על מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך, שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן, תערוך לפני שולחן, תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צהרי, נשענת לשמן ראשי, נשענת בשמן ראשי, נשענת בשמן ראשי, כוזי רוויה. אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. What can we know of death, we who cannot understand life? We study the seed and the cell, but the power deep within them will always elude us. Though we cannot understand, we accept life as the gift of God. Yet death, life's twin, we face with fear. But why be afraid? Death is a haven to the weary, a relief for the sorely afflicted. There is no pain in death. There is only the pain of the living, as we recall shared loves and as we ourselves fear to die. Calm us, O God, when we cry out in our fear and our grief. Turn us anew toward life. Awaken us to the warmth of human love that speaks to us of you. People rise for El Maleh Rachamim, please. El Maleh Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amitzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utehurim Kezahar Harakia Mahazirim Et Nishmat Moshe Leib Ben Mudcha V'Chana Neched Shel Pesha Shehalach Le'olamo Baal Harachamim Yasdirehu Beseter Kinafov Le'olamim B'tzror b'tzror ha'chaim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato Yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Moshe Leib ben Mudcha v'Chana, Mel Sapsewitz, son of Max and Annette, grandson of Pauline, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. Let us say, Amen. Amen. In many houses all at once, I see my mother and father, and they are young as they walk in. Why should my tears come to see them laughing? That they cannot see me is of no matter. I was once their dream. Now they are mine. Lower the coffin.
Little handle if you want to just flip it up, that'll lower the casket.
This? Oh, okay.
Right, there you go.
Thank you. The dust returns to the earth as it was. The spirit returns to God who gave it. It is only the house of the spirit which we now lay within the earth. The spirit itself cannot die. Receive in mercy, O God, the soul of our departed. Grant him that everlasting peace which you have prepared for us in the world to come. Though no human eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor mind has grasped it, still it is our sure inheritance and our everlasting portion. God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which loss inflicts is the measure of a love stronger than death. Though we cry in the anguish of our hearts, may we be like children who know their parent is near and who cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In this spirit, God, do we commit all that is precious to us to your keeping, as we repeat words hallowed by the generations. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei Rabbah ba'oma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'gala v'zman kariv v'imru Yehei shmei Rabbah mavorach leolam ol'omei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yidaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei kudsha La'ela mikol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma Ru. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya chayim aleinu al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. In. If folks want to help fulfill this mitzvah, I would love that. Let's take turns. Wishing you wishing you the merit of your mitzvah and many more.
Thank you. It was an honor. About 5 months ago, so
I'm sorry.
you'll find that peace.
Thank you. I wish you sweet memories.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we're good.
May God comfort you
May God comfort you
with all who mourn
with all who mourn
in Zion and Jerusalem.
in Zion and Jerusalem.
Makom yinachem etchem b'to sha'ar av leitzion v'Yerushalayim. God will comfort you amidst all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. Amen. Now go forth in peace.
Only good things.
Not supposed to thank people for doing a mitzvah. Tizkula mitzvot. May you all have the merit to fulfill many more mitzvot.
So beautiful. Such wonderful, wonderful stories. family.